So here is the book. You can take a look at it, and it is being offered to you with this conference with a discount, just in case you're interested in having it. Because it's almost 500 pages, and the amount of time we have together today is going to kind of be skipping pebbles across the pond. Adoption is about disassembling and reassembling of families on their various family trees. And since most of us have ancestors and we have family members who come after us, we really are talking about impacting up to 16 family trees. The issues are lifelong, intergenerational, and they're very complex. And it's a rocky road. Our purpose of introducing the core issues has always been to offer a roadmap to healing, to depathologize the complexities built into adoption and permanency. And part of it is that people's reactions to these institutions are normal reactions to abnormal situations. Normal reactions to abnormal situations. Now, it's true that people experience adoption and permanency differently, and their feelings can change over time. And this is particularly true for children, because what they understand about it is going to change as they develop and their brain grows, and they understand more about what they've lost and what's happening in their own life and where they might be going. So their feelings keep evolving and keep responding to new information. I will tell you that as a great-grandmother, how I experience adoption today is very different than it was when I came into the field in my 20s and when I first parented at 21. The differences of how we actually respond to these experiences has a lot to do with our temperament, which is a genetic issue. Our level of resilience, are we kind of bounce back people, or does it take us a while to catch our breath and climb back up that mountain again? Our gender, we know that men and women respond very differently to the issues of the core issues. Our age at which things occurred, and also where we are now. Our cognitive and language abilities. I'm just going to put them up here for you to look at. Certainly, the genetic factors impact how we feel, our personality type, our motivational system. Are we seekers, goers? Are we curious? That's definitely a genetic issue. And some people live life one day at a time, and that's fine. And they're not concerned about the past. They're focused on today. If I got a roof over my head and food on the table and clothes on my back and I got a job and life's good. Other people come into the world asking questions, and they're asking questions the minute they can put them into words to get them out of their mouth, and how sensitive we are. Also, many people in our constellation have experienced some kind of trauma, a crisis that was pretty meaningful to them. And it just depends upon what age when it occurred, how long did that trauma go on, how strong was it, how did it impact their thinking, their verbal ability, their emotional skills, and certainly whether the trauma was experienced in isolation or others, whether your siblings, family members, or close friends, or parents of friends. Did you have people around you who helped buffer some of that? And did people acknowledge that you'd had a crisis or a trauma in your life? Did you have support from others who said, yes, you've been through a lot and I'm here to support you? This is a quick image of the old adoption triangle. We want to throw that away. It's frozen in time and it's limited. It doesn't talk here about the prenate, the infant, the toddler, the child, the preteen, the teen, the adult, and the old grandmas. It affects us lifelong. And although we have birth parents here, the truth is with the old triangle, birth fathers were rarely discussed. And so it was pretty much birth mothers. And adoptive parents are never in isolation. They have other people connected to them. And during the time of that practice, a good deal of what was going on for us was based on secrecy and shame. there was a lot of shame connected to infertility, to not being raised with your family of origin, not being able to raise your child. So language, practice, stereotyping, and myths were very much a part of that way of doing adoption. When I came into the field in the 60s, that's what I was looking at. And probably many of you were in constellation mode in the 60s and 70s. So here's the thing that we need to remember. When people do something for you, when they say, we'll take care of it, don't worry about it, when they don't really listen to what you want, if you weren't talked to as a child, if people just didn't think that your desires were realistic, if they dismissed them out of hand, you lost a lot of power and control, and people weren't doing things for you, they were doing things to you. And that's really an important part of trauma. This is the new triangle. It's all of us, constellation members, all in the middle of the triangle. And on one side of us are the attachments that we've lost, the people we weren't raised with, the children we weren't able to raise, members of our family tree, maybe a half of a family tree. Maybe we knew everything about our birth first mothers, but not anything about the male side of our family. Whatever traumas we experienced, were we hungry, were we abused, were we abandoned, were we lonely, all of those things, were we ill? And then all of that is resting on the core issues. So who we were is no longer the same person. So this is the new image. It's not charts anymore. It's a cycle, because we go around this quite a bit. That big, huge thing in the middle, that's loss. Everybody loses something before they gain anything. And those losses are profound. They're profound. They change us to the core. Every constellation member suffers a significant loss before they gain anything. So it changes the trajectory of your life. We do not always understand it at the time that it occurs. It unfolds as we develop and go through phases of our lives, and the symptoms manifest in our bodies, minds, and hearts. These are new ways of looking at loss. We've tied it to all the developmental unfolding in the research of what children do with their understanding of the world around them. We've added attachment and trauma to part of the process. And we are looking at its impact, not just on the mind, but what's happening to the body physiologically. So symptoms of loss are any of these. I will tell you that children are very often the ones who are reactive and angry. So if you were one of those kids who got in trouble for throwing things, for yelling, for slamming doors, whatever it might have been, that's one of the responses to loss. You were normal. You were in an abnormal situation being normal. We can be self-punishing. These losses can set us up to be rather destructive. We might keep losing things. We may dream about losing. We're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Who else or what else is going to leave me? And there was a study done about adoptees' dreams. And one of the things that came out from that study was that there was a frequent story about sleeping in your bed, being in your bedroom, waking up in the morning, going downstairs, and there's nobody there. And you go outside and there's nobody in your neighborhood. You've literally been abandoned in a home, in a place that you know, but your people are gone everywhere. Very common dream of loss. You may find yourself not very joyful, kind of depressed, kind of flat. You may think of yourself as a victim. You may feel confused about your life circumstances. Now, one of the added things to the book was to look at 3 kinds of losses that we want you to think about. One is that profound, big, gigantic loss, your family trees, or the child you would have had that you didn't, or a child that you had and you didn't get to raise. And maybe that child was ripped away from you. Maybe you were lied to. Huge losses. Then there's all those secondary losses when people say, did you ever have a child? How many children did you have? How come you don't look like your parents? How come when you go to the doctor, you don't have all the information that you need? Those are secondary losses. And they come up in terms of anniversary reactions at certain times of the year, certain holidays, maybe birthdays. Those come up as secondary losses, and they're painful because the devil is always in the details. There's ambiguous losses where maybe, as my kids would say, they have double dip feelings. So maybe on one hand, you know your child's okay and the child is growing well and cared for. On the other hand, you want the child to be with you and you're angry. Or maybe as an adoptee, you're grateful and love the people who did eventually care for you, but you're always grieving the loss of the family you didn't grow up in or the loss of information. We can have ambiguous losses and we can have vicarious losses. You know, emotions are catchy. And if we're having a really tough time, we can pass it along to our partners, to our other children, to our friends and family, to our coworkers. We can kind of bleed on other people who are innocents to the whole project, to the whole process. And I think sometimes children bring vicarious losses into whatever family that's raising them. They come in with their little suitcases of loss and they unpack them, and pretty soon the whole family is feeling kind of out of sorts and having a tough time. So we really delve deeply into the types of losses and how they're manifest. And I will tell you that we've got, you know, many pages of losses that we were able to come up with in talking to Constellation members. One of the best things you can do, and I noticed that you had a Dr. Spiro who was doing creative writing with some of you through VANISH. And I thought, what a great opportunity. We need to write a journal of our loss history. And you need to start with your own in utero experience, your own birth, and then all the details of losses. Maybe you're going to fill up 3 books, but get clear what you've lost and keep it ongoing as you continue through life, because it's the beginning of your healing. It's the beginning of your healing. So it's real clear. I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's real important that you look carefully at what your losses are. And, you know, even a loss of certainty. For children, it's a loss of naivete. You know, they're different. They've had terribly different experiences that children who were born into a family, grew in that family, didn't have. They trust the world in a different way. So very quickly, I would suggest you do the loss inventory and think about what physical symptoms come up in your body when you're experiencing a loss. And what have you learned from your losses? How do you feel about yourself? And then it's going to bring up anger and resentment, and we're going to have to look at some point at forgiveness of self and others as a way of moving on. But you can write letters to people and maybe share them with a friend or burn them up in a bowl. And it's real important. You're going to hear me say this all the way through. We absolutely looked at all the research. You have to have physical movement, good breath work, yoga, massage, and as much of the creative arts as you possibly can do as a way of healing from these deep-seated losses. What I have found is that adoptees overall are some of the most creative people I know. They're poets, they're artists, they're actresses, they're musicians, because they learned at a very early age to kind of live in their fantasy world and to work things out in that way. So do it, use it. It's important for you. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, practice mindfulness. Pull yourself back to the present. Think about what you smell, what you taste, what you hear, you know, what you see, where the tension is in your body. Bring yourself back. Notice where you are. And remind yourself that at that moment, you're okay. At that moment, you have what you need. Now, what we do is we take those losses and we personalize them And we do it because we're trying to figure out what happened and could I ever stop that from happening again? If I can figure out what I did, maybe it won't happen to me again, because after all, it hurts. And the way we experience that is we feel rejected or we fear rejection. Feel or fear rejection. And the rejection can be experienced either real, imagined, we made it up, we think it was that way, or implied. So rejection can be real, imagined, or implied. And it typically creates immediate negative effects in the mind and the body. It stops us from thinking logically. We lose access to our prefrontal cortex. And we may actually get into a habit of rejecting others before they reject us. We want to take that power. So we don't give people a chance. We don't take risks in our relationships. Some people are afraid to commit to anything. So they constantly move, they constantly change jobs, they initiate plans and don't finish them. For a lot of the children that I know, they will do their homework and you'll look at it and it looks great, but it never gets to school and they get a failing grade because they don't want somebody else to judge their work. They're afraid. And what we learned that was so interesting from several pieces of research and talking to doctors is that the pain of rejection lives in the same part of the brain where physical pain lives. And when we feel the pain of rejection, if we're feeling awful, if we've got pain in our body, if we take an aspirin or a Tylenol or whatever you would take in Australia that's on the market, take it. It actually will make you feel better. So it does influence our emotional and physical health. And people who are feeling or fearing rejection don't sleep as well, and their immune systems are suppressed. So ask yourself, how do you feel when you're rejected? What emotions surface, and what do you do about it? I know for many birth first parents that I've talked to, they're very afraid that a child that they weren't able to keep, even if it was trickery, we've seen that in the United States too. They're still afraid that that child will reject them, will hate them. And that's kind of an ongoing experience, or a feeling of, I didn't try hard enough, I didn't fight hard enough, I didn't scream hard enough, I didn't run fast enough. And for children, there's that feeling of, you mean nobody in my whole country wanted me? You mean nobody on all my family trees stepped up to take me? Or a fantasy that somebody looked at them and went, ugh, ugly child, or this child cries too much, or this child is too demanding, or this child breaks too many things, that somehow I deserved that rejection. And if I could get better and figure it out, it won't happen to me again. The other way of dealing with this is to become an ultimate people pleaser and to work very, very hard all the time to do what you think other people want you to do, rather than going with what's right for you. So in what ways have you felt rejected? Do you reject other people? And if so, how does that affect you? What do you do when somebody rejects you? What are the feelings and how do you respond? And I think one of the things that's important here is to recognize that an accumulation of rejection leads to anger. Anger needs to be let out of your body physically and vocally. You need to make a lot of noise. Now, rejection impacts our self-esteem and our self-worth, and that becomes the next core issue. The key questions that most people ask is, why me? What did I do or not do to deserve this? Deserve not raising my child, deserve not having a child, deserve not being with any of the members of my trees. Children, due to their egocentric thinking, believe that the things that happen to them, including abandonment, abuse, neglect, divorce, and death, are a result of something they did, and it's their fault. Now, shame originates as a negative reflection from others. It's an outside-in emotion where somebody else gives it to us. Maybe the way they look at us, the things they say to us, the turning away from us. If we're in utero and our mother doesn't acknowledge us, we're being shamed even before we're born. So shame not only lives in the mind, but it inhabits the body. So if you see somebody who's shame-based, they look like they're curling up. Their voice is very low. They don't look you in the eyes. They're very bland. They would like to just disappear. I look at the dog's face and it reminds me of that. Guilt develops from the earliest parent-child attachment experiences. Guilt is a learned social emotion that helps us to live in society and belong. Guilt doesn't develop till around 7 or 8, and it develops based on an attachment to somebody, and that attachment allows us to take that person inside of us, and they grow in us and they become our conscience. And then around 7 or 8, we then develop and can be managed through guilt. It's not a bad thing, is what I'm saying. However, there is maladaptive or unhelpful guilt. And it's really the discomfort, the psychological discomfort that we experience when we hold ourselves or somebody else holds us to such high standards that we keep failing. And that's another experience of fear of rejection. So it impacts our self-esteem and self-worth. There are 4 pillars to self-esteem, and all of them are kind of knocked apart by our experience as constellation members. One of them is uniqueness. There never was anybody like us before. There never will be anybody like us in the universe again, and no 2 people have the same fingerprints. We're not unique because we're adopted or adoptive parents, or we're birth first parents, or we're children of surrogates. That's not the issue. Your job is to figure out how you're unique. Aside from that, why are you here? It's an important question. What purpose do you serve? Role models. First of all, do you know other birth first parents who've kind of mastered their life experience, are healed and healthy and joyful? As adoptees, do you know adoptees that have accomplished that for you? Role models also include our mirror images. If we've been cut off from all our trees, we may not see anybody who looks like us. And if we don't have our mirror images, we really don't have any role models that allow us to feel good about ourselves. Connections. This has to do with our genetics, our connections to the past, and that often helps us understand where we can go in the future. What if all that material is missing? Where are our connections? If we as a birth first family don't know where our children are, we can't put that to rest. That's our genetic launch into the future. And belonging. That's your clan. Those are the people today, the people you go to hug you, to be with you on holidays, to honor you on your birthdays, to loan you money, to teach you to drive, to be there when you're sick. We call them our peeps. Who are your peeps? So the weaker these 4 pillars, the harder it is for us to move forward with good self-esteem in our life. There may be shame or guilt from losing a child. We may have shame from the outside in with people judging us. We may carry it as a secret because we're afraid if anybody really knew who we were, that they might reject us, and that would further impact our self-esteem and create more shame and guilt. Certainly the same for children. There's a shame about being different, being the other, being the outsider. So list 5 things about which you feel guilt or shame. And I'm hoping that this address will be on VANISH's website so people can keep looking at it over time. In what ways do you feel inadequate, and where did that come from? Find your constellation peers. Cultivate deep friendships and support groups. Become friends, support each other, because that diminishes your isolation and helps normalize your feelings. And shame and guilt can create toxic stress, which needs to be physically released. Yoga and massage are two really important pieces for releasing shame and guilt. Body work is a wonderful way to go. And I want you to think about 10 ways that you nurture yourself. Treat yourself as your own best friend. So adoption and permanency losses are very often left unnamed, unacknowledged, and ungrieved in a society that sees all this as in the past and a problem-solving event. Get on with your life. Go ahead, get on with your life. The only way to get on with your life is to stop and do your grief work. Get that boulder cleared out of the road. Acknowledging loss and making room for the joy and the passion and the work of grief is essential to any healing process. Grief includes remembering. That means going back, writing it in your journal, remembering, recollecting, feeling. How did you feel about it when you were 5, when you were 10, when you were 16, when you were 24? Have they changed? Questioning, what are you missing? Who's missing? What information is missing? And constantly reorganizing your story as a part of doing your loss history. And remember that grief is a highly personal, individual experience, and there is no prescription to shorten the process. Grief is messy, and you have to take some time out to address it. Grief can make people feel crazy and unhinged and on a roller coaster ride and alone and out of control. And little things can trigger you. Watching somebody holding a child walk across the street, a birthday, a card, a smell, a memory, being in a hospital, honoring somebody else's birth of a child, whatever it might be. Those triggers are very, very strong and can be painful. We might find ourselves wandering through life, forgetting things, not finishing what we start. I know when I'm grieving because I read a lot and I can't remember what I read. I'm reading the same page over and over and over again. So your brain feels offline, distracted, and overwhelmed. And this is important to know about children, because when children are grieving, they're not walking around going, oh, woe is me. There's a whole section of the book that talks about how children grieve at different stages of their development. Mostly they're angry. They have physical problems, stomach aches, headaches, and they can't learn. They can't remember things, and you're yelling at them. Why? I told you that 10 times. If they're grieving, they're not going to remember things. So physical symptoms will lower your immune system. It will create what we call a plum pit in your throat where you can't swallow. You always feel a little upset in here. You might have heaviness in your chest, which may lead into a panic attack, or you might feel like you're having a heart attack. Remember, all these emotions hit your body. We're body, mind, and spirit. We may have headaches. We may have lots of intestinal symptoms. One of our adoptees here, Ann Heffron, who's a prolific writer, talks about having adoptionitis. She said she always had stomach aches growing up, and she realized as an adult that that was her adoption. She didn't have appendicitis, she had adoptionitis. When grieving, people may do things in extremes: sleep too much, not be able to sleep, eat too much, not be able to eat. Grief often comes in waves of emotion that encompass both sadness and longing, as well as smiles and laughter, and both are okay. And there will be anniversary reactions that you have to learn about and prepare for. And remember that it's very common to idealize those people that we've lost. So list 5 things that you've had when you experienced grief, 5 feelings. Describe how you've avoided the work of grief. Are you busy all the time? Examine how your gender, your culture, your age, your life experience, and your spiritual beliefs either expand or hinder your expression of grief. Use your support system and tell people what you need. Pardon me, I got the hiccups. Tell people what you need. And if things are really difficult, find an adoption competent therapist or a good constellation support group to help you through that process. But don't avoid it. It's what you desperately need. This is a wheel that you can get off the internet, the wheel of emotion. When we're little, we have sad, mad, scared, and really joyful or happy. We have to expand that language out so that we more and more can dig into those deeper emotions and deal with them. And we have to teach those words to our children as age appropriate. I keep this up on my wall because it's very helpful for me to look at it occasionally. Now, if we do all that work, and I'm talking fast here now, if we do all that work, then we get to the other side, the healing side of the wheel, and that includes identity. Our search for identity is the heart of the human journey. It starts even before you're born. How we feel about ourselves has a lot to do, again, from the outside in. Are we acknowledged? Are we talked to? Do we feel a connection to the mother? And it continues all of our life. My identity is different today than it certainly was even 5 years ago. However, the big push, as we all know, is preteen through around age 27, 28, when the computer in your brain comes fully online. So it's a long, hard journey. And people who have stories that are broken due to historical or personal events, it can make it very difficult. If you can't understand your story, it's difficult to build a cohesive identity. And identity includes all these things. I'm not going to stop and list them for you, but we do explain in the book how each of these things is formed and why they're important. The words associated with identity are either self-described, we assign them to ourselves, or attributed by others. And they can be positive or they can be destructive. And so we want to really look at, how do we describe ourselves? You might ask people who know us, how would you describe us? See whether they match. And if you have an ascribed identity that other people have given you, has it been positive or has it been destructive? Does it feel true to you? Your mental model of yourself, your psychological identity, relates to your self-image, your self-esteem, and how you see yourselves as unique. So we're back to those 4 pillars. Identity is based not only on what we are, but also what we are not. It springs from our experiences, perceptions, and interpretations of our own past. It's reflected by others, how we're labeled, how we're addressed. It allows us, if we have a cohesive identity, to project what we want into the future. But remember that our self-identity emerges from relationships, and it allows us to have the gains of permanency. So list all the words. Ask others to describe you and see if they mesh. Think about how you formed your identity. What part was difficult because of your being impacted as a constellation member? And claim and create the narrative of your story. Feel free to change it as you get new information. If we have a cohesive identity, we're in a position to have intimate emotional relationships. I'm not talking about sexual relationships. I'm talking about emotional relationships. But remember that intimacy and identity are linked. They're one and the same. As a person clarifies and reclarifies who they are, their ability to relate to others, to forgive others, to embrace others, and trust others is enhanced. And because we've all been moved around on these huge family trees, there may be a part of us that's a little bit worried about getting close to others, because we may feel that individuals are easily lost or replaced or interchangeable or substituted. So it gives us a feeling that if we build attachments to others, we could create more pain for ourselves. When information's withheld or unavailable, intimacy can become hampered by lack of our story. Here's the thing, intimacy involves risk, vulnerability, and the belief that you're valuable, that you're resilient, that you could survive loss again, that you're worthy of love. And your primary motivation in life should be to belong, to get your needs met through human connections. Intimate attachments provide the network where all of our other needs are met. But they do require trust of ourself and trust of another, respect of ourself and respect of another, acceptance of ourself, acceptance of another. That's their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their strengths, empathy for ourselves and another, and I might add forgiveness of ourselves and another, and reciprocity, the ability to give and take, to look at the nuances between us in a relationship, to read each other, to attune to each other. And that means we have to be willing to self-disclose and be honest. It's like a dance. And in order to dance and not step on each other's toes or give up dancing, we have to understand ourselves. That's why all that self-awareness work becomes part of the whole journey of adoption. What are our needs? What are our thoughts? What are our feelings? What are our expectations of ourselves and another? What are our vulnerabilities? And how do we uncover our blind spots? If we hide our expectations, then our connections are weakened. So it's more than words that communicate feelings. Emotions are revealed in how we hold our bodies, our willingness to make eye contact, our tone of voice, our facial expressions. Does everything match? Does our tone of voice, our facial expressions, the way we hold our body, does all that match? Or does something feel off and we don't trust it, either in ourselves or another? We mostly learn our primary dance steps in childhood, but we can change them as they get more sophisticated over time. What's important to me is that so many birth first parents I've known really well is they have multiplicity of surface relationships, but they're really frightened of going much deeper. And they associate intimacy with loss. They're afraid. And they may feel emotionally unworthy. And children often don't have a solid enough identity. They fear being left again. And so intimacy can be greatly impacted if they don't have deep attachments. So I would like you to think about how adoption and permanency has impacted your intimacy. I want you to think about all the barriers that make it difficult for you. And I want you to think about your own hopes and fantasies. And then I want you to reflect on the healthiest relationships you've ever had, the people you trusted, and identify what qualities they demonstrated that allowed you to feel safe and vulnerable with them. That's an important clue. And take time to build trust in yourself and others. Allow yourself to be touched and touch other people daily. Nurture yourself. Finally, mastery and control. This is where we should be. It's a proficiency, a command or grasp of a subject, a skill, or a knowledge base. In our case, understanding what happened to us and mastering our life experiences in a way that we can use them as lessons and build on them, build our strengths on them. It includes mastery over your life circumstances, which is very deeply connected to self-awareness. Mastery requires an individual to be open to sharing your needs, to building deep, intimate emotional connections. It does not mean we're done grieving or processing our losses and complexities. Control is the power to influence others. And we all lost power and control. Everybody did in this process. So the loss of control over your early life journey diminishes your sense of your future. And we want you to be driving the bus. That's why we have that image. Drive the bus of your own life. If we don't get hold of our control issues, then we over-control other people. We send them away. We set up battles. We can't build our deep relationships that are fulfilling. And power is a strong component of resilience. So if we regain our voice, if we stand up in our power, if we know our needs and we claim them, if we know who we feel safe with in life, then we are resilient if we have another loss. It gives us the opportunity to push back and have an effect. But this isn't easy, because gaining mastery is confronting our habitual behavioral system, our habits, which are operating at a very deep level of our conscious thought. They're difficult to change. So it requires awareness so that you can practice what behaviors and patterns in your life cause you to lose, cause you to feel rejected, cause you to want to reject other people, trigger your shame and guilt. What do you do? What do you do that brings that back up? So self-awareness is knowing that you matter. You matter to yourself, and you matter to all the people in your life, and you matter to the other constellation members. So you have to bring into conscious awareness your belief about yourself and others and the world. You have to be willing to go out and be your own best detectives. Gather your knowledge. You all need to clarify your stories. And then you got to practice, because you're going to fail. And that's what you did when you learned to ride a bike or swim or ski or any other things you had to learn to do. Your multiplication tables, you fail until you break that habit, until you learn how to gain the skill that allows you to feel like you've mastered that topic. So list the ways that you've lost power and control in your life. What are you in control of, and how do you act when you lose control? And identify those people who have empowered you. Maybe it's a really good therapist, but identify those people who have really empowered you, and be learning from other constellation members, and find your purpose in life.